Hello and welcome to the second episode of Power Without Fuel. If you haven't seen episode 1, jump over and get an idea of what I'm about. Stop at the walkthrough if the poor sound quality annoys you. I have ditched the little 4K camera for future use with sound. There is not much to say about the first failed model. It is the model at the back on the table in the thumbnail, or you can see it halfway through looking at my granny flat if you proceed further on episode 1. It's the model with the metal rod through it, and it's that rod that mainly caused the failure. Briefly, the hot glue the inner wheel is fixed to it by just shreds when it is turned. The strengths of the magnets on both wheels are so strong they pull together in one place and won't budge when the rod is turned. I put the failure down to the weaknesses in the model itself, so the idea may work after I can get a stronger model built. The next iteration tries to address this with a printed plastic rod that is a square section, as seen in the foreground on the table. I also had to make the clearance between the wheels a little wider. It's a learn as I go process, and I expect to have many failures before I succeed. Few people ever crack a problem with a first attempt. I have to say, in my defence, I have never made a model of anything on a 3D printer in my entire life, and I travel down to my brother's house to pick up the pieces he prints for me. I was adept at drawing houses in SketchUp Make, but discovered I couldn't do anything for 3D printing on it. So I had to rapidly learn how to use Tinkercad, and it is nothing like SketchUp. I spent hours trying to figure out how to get the magnet's hole angles alone. That's enough for now about my making models. For the rest of this time on this early episode, I am going to talk about the idea behind perpetual motion machines, and in particular, magnet generators. There is plenty of time to show my efforts to make various iterations in later episodes. And besides, I don't have enough material about the first attempt to last 2 minutes and at present, because I am keeping some things to myself until I have a better idea of where this is heading. However, the history of well over 100 years of failures is interesting, and viewers need to see at least as much of the general picture as I have picked up on in the short time that it has taken my fancy. There is a lot that is vague and often shady about the attempts we find along the way, which are mostly sourced right here on YouTube. Very few were done through Google searching. Here is a disclaimer of sorts. As I mentioned in episode 1, I will give my opinion, and so take it with a grain of salt. In these early episodes, it is not useful information per se with respect to my models, but I like to be as truthful as I can and am not immune to being deceived. So if I stray from facts, by all means, tell me in the comments section below. I can stand correction, and I welcome any help that comes my way. I am not averse to correcting others myself, so try to be somewhat intelligent if or when you do. In my first week I have had 90 views, 11 likes, 2 dislikes, and 7 subscribers, so at that rate I'm unlikely to persist for too long. Please like and subscribe, but more importantly, just email and talk to friends to spread the word, even if the word is corny at this stage, but he sounds a bit like Crocodile Dundee. There are 2 aspects I need to cover, which unfortunately for you means more of watching me and less inserts for these next 2 episodes. That's why I have not put myself in the corner. I will try to be creative, but it is the dialogue that is important, not the visuals. In the interest of keeping clips under 20 minutes, I will dedicate this episode to YouTube offerings and possible scamming. Then in episode 3, I will concentrate on the cloak and dagger tricks of those hard to detect behind the scenes aspects of those who upload to YouTube. The conspiracy theories in a nutshell. Probably the best way to deliver this episode is by telling you how I got interested in the first place. We can thank YouTube for that, and an early retirement helped. While I worked full-time and helped my wife raise 5 kids, my spare time was spent mainly on relaxing in front of a TV, with my favourite interests being reading about cars and motorcycles. No marathon running for me. I had not accessed YouTube at all for many decades. About the first 5.5 there were none, but in retirement I found YouTube to be a source of hours of relaxation time that I now had in abundance. It is probably 3 or 4 years ago. The random generator that suggests things to watch showed something about a perpetual motion machine, and out of very little interest I watched it. Soon after, more videos were offered on similar lines. As I watched them, even more were offered. It's how YouTube rolls. After a short while, some of these were about magnetic generators that were using neodymium magnets, and I started to develop a real interest. I will make a distinction here between the first batch of perpetual motion machines and the magnetic generators which rely on perpetual motion. The early machines had all sorts of ways to either keep a ball moving or transfer water to move the entire machine, or something similar, incorporating gravity or the subtle movement of the earth, usually. They were intended to keep something moving without having a commercial use. That is, they were built for novelty value alone. They had no potential to do work, or that is how they seemed. The magnet generators looked more purposeful, since they were usually hooked up to small LED lights or other low-powered objects that could be of small benefit to man. 1 or 2 early examples were not harnessed to anything and were merely for novelty value. But as I saw more examples, the objects connected to them were needing and getting more power. It got to a stage where some were running drills and angle grinders, things you can work with. This intrigued me, and I wondered, if perpetual motion could be maintained, could we scale up the device so that it could run a house, drive a car, and be used in motorhomes, boats, aeroplanes, and factories? I.e., can we rid the world of the grid and buy power from grid suppliers? As I searched further, some videos claimed they already had such machines, even as big as cars, but when you checked Google, you discovered that years had passed and there were no such generators commercially available. I was not even a year old when German mechanical engineer Friedrich Lühling claimed to have made a motor that ran with permanent magnets for up to 20 years without stopping, fuel-free. 68 years and still no product. I'm going to have to try to read this a lot faster than the last screen. Here are some other failures you can check out. John Bedini, Mike Brady, Robert Calloway, Dennis Danzig, David Hamel, Howard Johnson, Sonny Miller, Jared Moran, Troy Reed, John Searle, Mohammed Yildiz, but they're just a few. About every chicken owner in India seems to have a go, as do smiling kids and contestants on Dragon's Dens around the world. There is no limit to the types of people who try it. I doubt there is a person I can point to that has had anything that is proven to be successful, so on face value one would conclude that everyone is a scammer. There are even YouTube videos that show how the scams are made. Some of the more recent models are obviously created in India or Pakistan or some region close by, places where the men wear dresses and wrap towels on their heads. I have not seen videos about how they scam, but I can guess myself. They have gigantic models that you would be hard pressed to put in the tray of a ute, which have steel frames so large and hollow they could hold enough batteries and wiring to power Keith Richards amps for a whole concert. But in the main, the lion's share of models are about as big as your fist and power an LED the size of your smallest toenail. 6-year-olds stick bigger objects up their noses. This discrepancy in the relative size of the model and what it powers is what makes them useless, because they indicate there is a scaling problem. Put bluntly, the roller skate wheel or the laptop fan they use to light the LED needs to be as big as a block of flats to power a fridge or an oven. There is no benefit in having extremely large objects powering small items. My quest, returning briefly to my model making, is to get a model that not only runs on its own power, but produces excess power disproportionate to its size in the opposite way to what you see on YouTube. I want a model I can sit on top of a fridge with room to spare and run it effortlessly. With this in mind, I come to the key point I want to make in this episode, which defies the trend of it being full of useless models. I will make other points in episode 3 before I get into looking at more of my attempts, because there are many points to canvas. It really is an interesting phenomenon when it comes to magnetic motion making electricity. The point comes from reading many comments in these videos that state that laws of thermodynamics preclude the possibility of ever having free power. It centers on the idea that there cannot be any more power extracted than what is injected. And I agree with it, but disagree with that being an excuse to not have free power from magnetic generators. That is, the law has been misinterpreted and falsely applied. My view is that we can make machines to harness the immense power that the Earth's magnetic field continually supplies. It injects the power and our machine extracts and converts it. If you were to compare it with something similar, consider the use of sailing ships to travel the vast oceans. These have been working for millennia. One more try to finish this off. If you weigh the famous Cutty Sark, you will find it takes a massive amount of energy to move it. If you put it in water, it takes far less. But regardless, to get it across the ocean, the energy required is still far too much for the occupants to inject, and most on board provide no energy at all, they being the passengers. However, the crew inject some energy as they trim the sails and steer the vessel. Such effort is paltry compared to the energy that actually moves the ship along. It's not rocket science to realise the lion's share of the energy is supplied by the wind, not the muscles in the arms of the crew. The ship is merely designed to harness wind power by making very little manpower the catalyst, hence no laws of physics are broken. And so it is with a magnetic generator. If we can design it in such a way that it harnesses the push and pull of magnetic fields, we can tap into the immense power of the Earth and convert some of it into electricity. As far as I can tell, magnetic fields and wind have similarities. You could say that a field is even better than wind if we can put it to use. A wind varies speed and direction. It can be dead calm and a ship is unable to move, and it can be gale force and destroy the ship. It can come from the direction you want to go, which makes the journey 5 or 6 times longer, or it can come from any other direction, varying your arrival time drastically. A magnetic field, on the other hand, is constant. The only drawback is that it displays some inexplicable behaviours when circular motion is required, and circular motion is definitely needed to achieve perpetual motion. These can be worked around, but so far nobody has a viable method for commercial applications. This is where I am giving it a try. I am amazed at the power in magnetism. I am not put off by science's claims, and I will give you a second analogy that makes me think it is feasible. The water wheel turns a millstone and grinds wheat into flour. The miller does not use his own energy for that. The hardest job is done by the stream passing by. This is circular motion, producing work. Not only does a linear stream get converted into circular rotation at the mill wheel, but the stream is also circular, as clouds upstream feed it, and evaporation downstream feeds the clouds, which the wind blows back upstream. 2 ways man has harnessed nature to do the bulk of the work, and magnets are just another opportunity. We're aware of gravity's power, and that is to defy it we need constant energy. We can't just apply energy in a single moment, then expecting something to levitate because we gave it more than gravity is acting on the object in an instant. It doesn't work that way. If we want to hold something up, the energy has to be supplied for the whole time it is up. That's why aircraft keep their engines running for the entire flight, then shut down to come down. Naturally, if you put something on a table, the strength of the table defies gravity all the time, but even that is constant. Put a magnet on the table and the table defies gravity for the magnet. Now put a magnet under the table such that the first magnet pulls it up to the underside, and the energy in each magnet hold that second magnet up. It's not the table. Take away the top magnet and the table won't hold the second magnet for a split second. But leave the top magnet and that second magnet will defy gravity for more than 1,000 years. Can you imagine how much energy the Earth is providing those magnets to defy gravity for such a long time? It is far more than the energy you spent placing them there. and I believe the source of power is enough to power factories once we scale up the magnets and solve the circular motion problem. Houses and vehicles should be even easier. The windmill, as well as the water wheel, are ancient examples of using circular motion to produce work, and in modern times they have been used to generate electricity. Again, the energy man injects to build and operate any circular device is always far less than the energy it supplies. There is no reason in my mind that we can't build a magnet generator that will run for 100 years without the need for fuel and produce electricity to enhance the lives of billions. To finish off my spiel on YouTube scammers, and you will notice I have drawn no conclusions, I'll leave that up to you to make your own mind up. I will tell you a little about a small exercise I did this morning that you can easily replicate on any given day. I searched on free energy generators and filtered the results on today. YouTube provides too many results for me to scroll down through, and many were totally irrelevant, but among them were dozens of these little useless magnet models and a few of the massive framed ones where the chooks roamed, uploaded within the last 24 hours. They must just churn them out incessantly. Most of the little models were showing how to make your own, and yes, you could make a 40-watt light bulb out of a model 4 times larger and 50 times heavier than the globe, with a promise that it's a powerful 220-volt generator that is free. I don't know of anyone who has succeeded in making any, so if someone has, tell us about it in the comments section. If you searched on other things such as perpetual motion, free electricity, neodymium magnets and similar phrases, you may find hundreds of uploads daily. And remember, this is for claims that science insists is impossible. If the topic was recipes for the best chocolate cake, at least we all know chocolate cakes are real. This is just an overview of how I got interested and what is happening daily on YouTube. In future episodes I will cover aspects I discovered as more comments were read and more scams were watched, before I concentrate on building more models. As I've shown in the first episode, I have my first failed prototype and the unassembled parts of my second attempt. The reason for the first not working is known to me and is no deal breaker. There are two main issues. First, there is the problem of magnets stopping abruptly when spinning around and nobody knows why. And secondly, there is the question of scalability. Can you get a motor small enough and to drive a car and still have room to put people in it? I expect new changes and probably a few models before I solve those problems, or conclude that it is unattainable. Whichever. Either way, I will be honest, you will not get me claiming something works and having hidden power sources within. I will leave that to those video makers in dresses who are running welders for about 30 seconds and their frames are tube steel that can hold a lot of lithium batteries to do the job. Those gigantic machines you will never see in production that are already too big to fit in a car's engine bay anyway. In episode 3 I will discuss other issues because there are some cloak and dagger elements to this fascinating topic that need pursuing. See you later and stay safe.